Sorry. Thank you very much for making the time to come along, because I know it's not easy. We're all busy and have a lot going on in our lives. So just a quick, brief introduction about myself. So as Lisa said, I'm a member of the Complex Care Board. I have a 19-year-old son with high and complex needs. I'm also an admin for a support Facebook group called iFunds, and I work part-time at Disability Connect. So in the last couple of years, I've kind of merged into becoming a bit more of a, I don't know, I'm not a guru, but I've spent a lot of time researching for my own family about what to do. And so it sort of morphed into me being hopefully able to explain and answer questions here today on individualised funding and personalised budgets. I have been using individualised funding for my son for 10 years. Prior to that, obviously, we used the other different types of disability supports, of which I've always challenged if we didn't get what we wanted. So today I'm not representing Disability Connect. I am here in context of the Federation and Complex Care Group, as Lisa had said. So I'm an independent person sharing information about both IF and personalised budgets, with the hope that those that are here will find the information useful so that you can get more, have more understanding and more functionality out of those systems, and to maybe hopefully clear up some of the different ways that they are applied, so that it's easier to use. So I'm primarily, in the first 30 minutes, we're going to start a little slideshow. I will run through quite a bit about individualised funding, and then we'll move into how personalised budgets under EGL. So because we're structuring this as having a presentation first and then questions, I'm going to ask you, if you have a question during the presentation, to maybe just pop it in the chat, so you don't forget what your question is by the time we get to the end. This is, I know for myself, if someone's talking, sometimes I just want to know the answer straight away. But because of the way we're doing this, it may not be possible for me to answer the questions as we go along. But I don't want you to lose what your questions are, because it's really important to make sure you get what you need out of this session. So I will now just switch the screen so that you're going to see my little PowerPoint. Hopefully you're not going to see all my emails, which I tried to share before, but we'll have a go now. Might be a moment. Okay, so first off, I just thought I'd just run through a little bit of how we got to individualised funding and personalised budgets in a very brief way. So starting back in 98, so a wee while ago now, individualised funding was first introduced for younger, more complex people, because it was already happening overseas, but the systems that were in place weren't actually keeping up to scratch with what families and disabled people were needing. That wasn't really individualised funding as we know it now. It was slightly different, but still under that broad banner. After about 5 years, 2003, there were about 250 families using an individualised funding scheme. And in 2004, so now we're going back 20 years, that's when we saw the introduction of hosts. So if you're not using individualised funding yet, the host is the body of people, if you like, that are an intermediary that don't actually hold funding in their account, but they make the processing of payments and things to support workers. By 2011, there was still a lot of angst over disabled people not having control and enough choice on things. So it was around this time that the Enabling Good Lives system was introduced. So from now on, I'll say EGL for Enabling Good Lives, and I'll say IF for individualised funding, if that's okay with you, because they're all mouthfuls. But just to keep it simple, make sure you know what it is. So the Enabling Good Lives approach was set up by disabled people and Family Whānau to basically, there is at the end of this slideshow an appendix which will explain the principles of the Enabling Good Lives. We're not going to go into big detail on that today because we've already had a session around Enabling Good Lives, but we're just going to talk about how that works with our budgeting. In 2012, Waikato and Christchurch started their Enabling Good Lives programs, which when we say they started their EGL programs, what we really mean is that they started having personalised budgets or flexible disability supports, which is different to how we do our individualised funding. So sometimes we get a little bit of confusion around what do we mean by EGL and what do we mean by personal budgets and what do we mean by individualised funding, which is what we'll cover today. In 2013, we had family funded care introduced, which was when we were first able to pay family members, but there were some restrictions around what family members could be paid, how much they could be paid. It was less than support workers, and also it might have only been for certain types, like very high needs, that sort of thing. That same year, Christchurch started under their EGL system with personalised or hosted budgets. 2014 was when Waikato started their actual personalised budgets. So 2013, 2014, so basically for 10 years now, those areas have been using personalised budgets. The rest of the country is still not using personalised budgets. 2017, we had pay equity for support workers come into effect. And this was also when the third demonstration area for Enabling Good Lives started. And that one is known as Mana Whaikaha, and that is the Palmerston North region and surrounding areas there. By 2020, family funded care and residential family care was disestablished. That doesn't mean that family can't be paid. It meant then that family had the same employment rights as what other support workers had. So it's probably like just thinking about how we've moved through the last 15 years helps perhaps us to see how far we've come, because there has been a lot of change. But that we've still got a long way to go with what we're doing with this sort of thing. In 2022, we had the Ministry of Disabled People, or Whaikaha, start in the middle of the year of 2022. And at that time, they announced plans for how the Enabling Good Lives personalised budgets would actually be starting to roll out. A lot of that work has not happened yet, but I guess these seminars and some other things that are happening now are some of the work that was hopefully going to be done in about 2021, 2022. So we're all a little bit, well, we're quite a lot behind, but it is important to sort of get an understanding of what the differences are now. So I'll just see if I can click the page. No, Lisa, I'll need you to flick to the next one, please. Melissa might have run away, has she? Sorry.
No, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, I'm just thinking. Yeah, no, I can't turn the page. So if you can, please.
Oops. There. Was that the next page, Shireen?
Yep. Perfect. Okay, so now we'll start off just having a look at what do we mean by individualised funding. So IF is a type of funding that comes from Whaikaha, or the Ministry of Disabled People. It was introduced so that we could have more choice in how we were using our funding, rather than funding going directly to providers, or the government saying that you had to use a certain agency to find your support worker, that kind of thing. So first off, if a person is deemed to be eligible for supports, they might be referred from their GP, their hospital, from school, wherever, to the NASC, which is your Needs Assessment and Service Centre. They're the people that will give the needs assessment to determine what kind of support is required for the eligible person and their family. So the NASC have the role of doing your needs assessment and then determining how that fits into what the government have deemed possible for the level of support you need. So often they come across as the bad guy, because we might want more support than they're giving us, but they're also, I guess, working within a budget of what they're allowed to give out for certain types of disabilities, and it's their, I guess, measured against their criteria that is set by the government. Once the needs assessment is completed, the NASC is then going to work with the person or their family of whānau, for those that have got children that are under the system, to find out whether IF is a suitable option, or whether they're better to not use individualised funding and work back via the NASC for their providers. For most people, if you want choice and control over who is coming into your home, how your funding is going to be used, where you want to, or how you want to spend your funding, then the best way of doing that is to go on to the individualised funding scheme. If we can turn the page. Okay, here's a big, long, horrible flow chart for you to all have a look at. But this is just the process that happens to how we have a flow through of having a needs assessment, and how it flows through to the NASC and how it flows through to the host. At this point, if we were doing this session without being recording, I'd probably say, does everyone know what a host is? Because I might just be talking gobbledygook if you're not sure. So fire those questions at me in the chat if you need to. So just to explain this, in the previous slide, we said the person or a family member who is representing a person is referred to the NASC because they've got a disability. It could be an age-related disability. It could be a health or a chronic health condition, or it could be a combination, intellectual disability. The NASC does the needs assessment and identifies goals with the person, and a support plan is created. Now, many of you, if you've been in the system a long time, the regular needs assessment may have been going through your, I'm going to say, tick boxes, and sometimes you mightn't fit the tick boxes. And now there's been a shift with the Enabling Good Lives principles that when you have a needs assessment, it should be a more outcomes-based plan. So it should be more about what you want to do, how you would like to do it, rather than what is it like a medical model where what is it that you can't do. So depending on where you're at with needs assessments, you may or may not have had a new one in the last few months, but most of the NASCs now are starting to update to have the newer style. Once it's established what funding the government is able to provide, that's when you would have the discussion whether you can use IF or you can ask to use IF if you want to. And then it's up to you to choose which IF host provider you want to use. So it's not the NASC who tells you which host to use. That is your choice. So most of you, if you're already using individualised funding, you may be with Enliven, you may be with Manawanui, you may be with Florence Nightingale. There is a full list of, there's 10 hosts. So it's up to you to make a choice for yourself, which one you think is going to suit your needs the best. Some hosts will also do recruitment, have recruitment services, but it's up to you to decide which one you want to run with. When you've selected your host, the NASC is then to send your referral to that host provider. And once the host has accepted it, that's when they're agreeing to start working with you. So the host then should be developing an individual service plan with you. Now, if you've also, I'm going to say here, in my own situation, 10 years of IF, I've never had a host develop an individual, an ISP. I'm hoping this is what's going to happen in the future. Just a comment there that sometimes that the NASC discourages the use of individualised funding. I would say it's still your choice. So this is where perhaps this seminar comes in for you to help decide, because with individualised funding comes administration as well. So it's up to you to choose. But you'll probably find, like on a NASC website, something there to say they will deem whether individualised funding is appropriate for you. Obviously, that's not the way it works with Enabling Good Lives. We have control. The disabled person has control. The family, in conjunction with the disabled person, has control. So if you want individualised funding, it's your right to ask for that. Once your individualised funding is set up, that is the point when the host should provide coaching to the person or the agent. And I'm just going to then move down. At that point, that's when, once you've accepted that you wanted to do individualised funding, they should be talking with you whether you want to be what we call self-managing, whether you want a payroll service, or whether you want a full service. So each of these comes with a service fee, which is taken out of your budget. So when you're given a budget, you need to also be aware that you're going to have fees from the host. Okay. Self-managing is basically when the host is still the what I'd call the fund holder, but you're going to pay your support workers or your purchases yourself, and then they'd be reimbursed into your bank account. Payroll, when you're using a payroll service, basically you would be sending timesheets of some description to your host, and they would be making the payments to the support workers directly. Full services would be if you were wanting them to handle all of your recruitment and everything as well, but you're going to pay more of a premium for that service. Just having a look there. Was just a question there or a comment that the outcome plan, I'll just read it again actually. Actually, no, I'll keep going because I'll come back to it at the end because that's what I said I was doing. Okay, so agreements in place are put in place between the person and the host provider. So you may say, I'm going to sign up to have just a payroll service because I think I can handle doing the other administration. Or you may go self-managing or full service. Then your services are delivered as per your plan. And then at the other end of it, so once you've got support workers on board, just as an example, you would then need to give that information of their timesheets, etc., back to the host. You have to keep records and the host has to keep records. So I know from my experience in a couple of the support groups, there's often a lot of, I'm not going to say, you know, what do I have to give the host? What information do they need to receive? So a lot of that is guided by what is needed to verify spending of government funding, but the host should not be being your gatekeeper to how you use your funding. Within reason, at the end of this presentation, I've got a slide that tells you what you can't spend funding on. The main things: alcohol, tobacco, and I'm sure you all know this, and also it can't be used to supplement personal income. Okay, so there's a few things, but yeah, there's always going to be grey areas for everything. The IF host provider invoices the Ministry of Health or Whaikaha for the services used. So the host isn't sitting there with the big pot of money. Basically, when you put a claim in for the money, they're then invoicing the ministry to get the money back. The ministry or Whaikaha pay the host, and the IF host then makes payments to you for the services that you have given them the information for. And then the Ministry of Health, well, not Ministry of Health now, because it's not called Ministry of Health, Te Whatu Ora and Whaikaha then monitor the host provider. I will just flip the page, Lisa. Okay, so what individualised funding will allow you to do? So it gives the person the ability to choose the host provider, gives you the ability to choose your support provider and your support service delivery plans. So that would be, when I say support provider, you can employ your a support worker or a family member, or you could be doing your purchases. You can employ your own support provider. So if you were using day services or writing for disabled or something like that, you could be paying that as well, and managing the payments for the services of support providers. If we can flip the page again, Lisa. Okay, so when you get an individualised funding budget, the NASC will actually give you the information about your budget. So once they've assessed what you need, you can go forward then and work out how you're going to spend your budget. So one thing that the NASCs don't share upfront generally is what the value of they're putting on things. So personal care hours. So normally when you get individualised funding, it is broken down into different categories. So normally you'll get you may not get all of these, you may get one, you may get two, you may get everything. So depending on what your disabilities are. Remember always, individualised funding is called that because it is individual to you. So what you have, what somebody else had, can be completely different. Your needs are different and you have a different package. So personal care is budgeted at $36 per hour. But that $36 per hour, if you were to pay somebody $36 per hour, you would be over your budget because that $36 basically has to cover the things that come out of when you're paying somebody as an employee, like KiwiSaver, your holiday pay, your annual leave, that sort of thing. So actually, let's say somebody, actually it's on the next slide, so I won't go there at the moment. What personal care is disability support hours for things like showering, toileting, feeding, dressing, things that you need assistance with or to have done for you completely. You can, under personal care hours, make some purchases that for personal care expenses or for items like hand sanitizer that your support worker might use. But when you make those purchases, that's all coming out of your budget. So you do have to think about the consequences of what you're spending and whether your allocation can maintain that. Household management is also done at a rate of $36 per hour. And household management would be things like meal preparation, grocery shopping, bed making, laundering, and cleaning inside the house. At this stage of time under individualised funding, gardening and lawn mowing are generally not included as household management. It's something that quite a few people are working on, like what's the difference of the outside to the inside and the ability to do it. But at this point, that seems to be an exclusion. Respite is paid out in terms of units, and when you get a funding allocation from your NAS, it will show as might be like 50 units, for example. So it's not done on an hourly basis. So each unit is worth $10. We will be doing a presentation on respite later in this series of hosted workshops. So if that's something that you need more detail on, I would suggest that would be a good one to attend. And I'll just get Lisa to flick the screen again. Okay, so most of you will have seen a letter from your NAS, and every NASC around the country sends out their letters slightly different, so I can't give you an example that's going to be generic to everybody. But when you get a budget for individualised funding, your NASC will normally send you a letter and say, you've got 5 hours per week, or you've got X amount of hours per year for personal care and household management. And then they'll also give you an allocation for respite or carer support, which is another form of respite payment. my suggestion to anyone that's new to individualised funding is to work out what your total individualised funding budget is for the year, because it's often a misconception that if you're given 5 hours personal care a week, that you use 5 hours every week. Life mightn't be the same every week. So if you want to use 3 hours one week and 7 hours the next week, you are able to do that. It doesn't have to be all exactly as it's deemed. It's calculated like that, but maybe you have a spouse or a sister or somebody that is able to do some things to assist you sometimes, but not at other times. So you may want to spread your funding out over the week. So personally, what I would normally do is I'd work out for my son, what is his whole allocation per year? What do I have to have every week for personal cares? Like what is the, what are the, if I'm employing people, what would I need to cover his needs each week? And then what flexibility have I got for other things in amongst that budget? There's always a grey area with personal care and household management. So say you're given a couple of hours household management and you're given 5 hours personal care, and your support worker comes and they're making a meal and assisting with also with feeding. Some of that might be considered personal care, some of that might be considered household management. For that reason, it used to be stricter, but when your budget is presented by your host, normally the personal care and household management hours may be in one budget. So depending on your host, it will depend on how they actually separate that out. I find it really hard not saying if you've got questions as we're going along. Guys, sorry, it's not my normal way of presenting. Okay, I don't like talking for so long. Sorry. Okay, so respite. We've got various types of respite that are available. So if you're offered in-home respite and individualised funding, that would be given to you as an allocation of units, of which they're worth $10 each. So in this example here, we'd have 50 units at $10. It would mean somebody had $500 a year. Or if they had carer support, 26 days at $80 would be $2,080 a year. If there's anyone here, I'm not sure if there is, but that just has carer support and no other funding streams, this at the moment is not able to be covered under individualised funding. So normally it would be carer support in conjunction with other things. Just a second, because I'm coughing, sorry. Once you've chosen your host and you've got your allocations, on the previous page we said that we got $36 an hour. So I'm not sure how much everyone on here knows about the pay equity rates, but the current pay scale for support workers is minimum wage. I think it's $22.70. I've got it on the next page. I can't remember now. Up to $28.25 is the top band. If you were to pay somebody $28.25 an hour, that actually works out to about $35 something an hour by the time you have all of these things that come out on top of the hourly rate you're paying the employee. So when we get a budget of total budget, we actually have to think about how we're going to make sure that the budget lasts the whole year. Okay, because if we run out, unless your circumstances have changed or your needs have increased, you're unlikely to get an extra provision of money. If your needs have changed, then you could go for a reassessment. So by paying $28.25, if somebody has KiwiSaver, we all have holiday pay, sick leave, ACC levies, and paying payroll fees. That is about the rate that will equal just under $36 an hour. Okay, so if you'd heard, okay, you've got up to $36 an hour, you actually need to realise that it's actually $28 something that makes that $36 an hour because of all the expenses that go with that. We can turn the page again. So when you are employing somebody using individualised funding, you have to be a good employer. So that could be you, the disabled person, or it could be your agent, if that's your family who's supporting a disabled person that might not be able to do it for themselves. So these are the minimum wage rates that we have to use. I'm actually just going to pop and get a glass of water, guys, because otherwise I'm going to cough my way through this. Actually, I'll keep going. Sorry, just a sec. Okay. So these bands here of how much you can pay someone. So the current minimum wage is $22.70. That's the minimum we could pay a support worker. And if you have somebody that's doing something like an overnight sleepover where they're not necessarily getting up, you may sometimes, in some cases, somebody might pay the $22.70 for the sleeping time, and they might pay a higher rate for the hours when a person is engaged in doing more things. Generally, once a person, if somebody is there for an overnight, has to be doing something a few times a night, then they might be expecting that they'd be on these other rates. Just one thing here, realistically now, the wage rates for people, most people that you're employing are probably expecting at least like the 24 to 26 because the minimum wage rate has gone up, if not more. If you decide to pay somebody more than the $28.25, in my case, I've done that with my son to make sure I get good employees. It does, of course, mean you're going to get less hours. But again, it's up to you. The pay bands here refer to whether an employee has qualification. And if you're using IF and you're the employer, it is your responsibility to offer a person that training. If they don't take it up, that's fine, but it is your responsibility to do that. At the bottom of the slide, there's just a little note there. If somebody comes to you and maybe they've been a teacher or a nurse or something like that, they're probably going to expect at least the level 4 type of rate. And that is actually also a legal requirement. I've got a link at the bottom here where you can check what other qualifications mean that people have to be paid at the higher level. Okay, and we'll flick over. How are we going for time, Lisa?
We're fine. Look, I'm sure if others are happy to stay on, we can go a little bit over the 1:30 time frame. Yeah, that's fine. We were a little bit late starting, so as long as people are happy to stay on, but we'll certainly allocate some discussion time. We meant to finish at 1:30, but let's see how we go.
Okay, I'll try and speed up a bit. So just with respite and individualised funding, again, this is something that can be spread out however you like. So once you've got your budget, you don't have to have 2 hours per week if you want to. You could have, if you've got 2 hours allocation, or it's not hours anyway, if it's units, you might use your respite only once a month or whatever, as long as it's going to last for your whole year. The host that you're using has responsibility to tell you if you're overspending, and normally they would send out a statement each month and it will give you a summary of what that spending is. And next one, carer support. So if you get carer support, it can be included in the budgets that are given to your host, but it works a little bit differently to in the way individualised funding works, where you're maybe paying a support worker, because employment rules don't really apply to the carer support allocations because it is a subsidy. So it's not like an hourly rate like you're getting with the other types of like personal care or for respite. Actually, the question that just popped up, what is pay rate for contractors, is on the next slide. So it's a very good question. Traditionally with carer support, you would post or email it down to Te Whatu Ora for processing. But if you have carer support in your individualised funding budget, it will be held with your host. So that would be processed that way. And flip to the next page. Okay, so when you get individualised funding, you can use that money to have employees, or you can have what we call contractors. So it's up to you to decide whether you have employees or you have contractors. But the main big difference is that there is legislation attached to having an employee. So if you're the employer, you must follow the rules that are set out in the employment legislation. If you're hiring a contractor, there is a really good, I've just put a link in here on the employment.government.nz website on what is the difference between an employee and what is a contractor. The main thing that you would normally be aware of is you can't make somebody a contractor to try and get out of paying them less than what they're entitled to. A lot of people use contractors for individualised funding. In the case of, at the moment, we have, if you have a disabled person that is unable to, I'm going to say a child or an adult child, is unable to manage their funding, they may but they have their family member as the agent, who then may then become the employer. And if that family member is the agent and employer of other support workers, but is also going to get paid, often they will become a contractor because they're not going to be the employer and the employee. So it gets in a little bit of a tangled web, but you have to have reasonable reasons reasonable, a good reason why you would have a contractor rather than an employee, I would say. And one of the main ones in our situations is generally if it's a family member, and they're also the employer for other people. Yeah. If a person is always working the same hours, same day, same time each week, they're unlikely to be pass the test to be a contractor, because a contractor should actually control their own hours. So just from personal experience, I have had contractors over time. Often it might be a person that has more than one client that they look after. So they want to run their job a bit like a business, like they're self-employed. And they might work with you to decide their hours together. So, you know, you might offer them hours, or they might say, I can do hours. So it would be a little bit different to an employee-employer relationship. Question before, if you're paying contractors, contractors are not employees, so you're not paying their holiday pay, their sick leave. If they're away for a day, they're just not getting paid unless you have something in a contract for it, but you normally wouldn't be doing that. So a contractor will normally invoice you, you pass on the invoice to the host, and then depending on whether you've got third-party payments or direct payments, that payment would either come to you or straight out to the contractor. So normally you might pay a contractor higher rate than an employee so that they're covering those costs themselves. So where we were looking at $28.25 for a top rate for an employee, you may be looking at $32 or $33 or $34 for a contractor, because they're not going to get any of those other benefits from you. So if someone is at the lower end of the pay scale, maybe they're just a new person that you're having to do a lot of training for, you may say, if you might have been paying them a minimum wage if they're an employee, $22.70, maybe you'd pay them $25 or $26 as a contractor. A contractor is responsible for their own tax and not your problem. Yeah, I'm not going to say not your problem, that sounds terrible. There isn't a minimum pay rate for contractors, no. But you'll probably find a contractor doesn't want to work for less than a minimum pay rate. In all things in life, it's just what it's about being fair as an employer as well. Both ways. You want your employee to be good to you, you want your employer to be good to the staff. And next one. I think I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but perhaps for your reference afterwards, this is what the host might do. So when I talked about full services through a host may be able to do third-party payments. This is when your contractor invoices you, and instead of the money then coming back into your account and you paying, they can pay directly to that third party. A host might offer you employer protection insurance. Just for your information, as an employer, if you have some sort of grievance or something like that from an employee, or you have a insurance issue on vehicles and things like that, well, actually that's not a good example because it's not covered, but you basically do want to have employer protection insurance in case one of your employees does something that you need covered. Hosts can also organise support worker training and also recruitment. And next one. Okay, at the beginning, we mentioned, well, I don't think I did mention actually, that the other category of individualised funding that we've got is one called enhanced individualised funding. If there is anyone here that's in the Bay of Plenty region, this is a program that was set up in that area, and enhanced individualised funding is basically what it says. It's a step up from individualised funding, where we can pay for a few more things, and the main one being items required to support your disability that are over and above what you would have under personal cares, household management and respite in individualised funding. I'm not going to go through a lot about enhanced individualised funding, because even though that was piloted in 2012, 2013, that will be taken over really by EGL and personalised budgets. So there won't be other areas, as far as I know, going on with that. And next. So now we get to personalised budgets. And a personalised budget is when you get, after you've had your needs assessment or your plan, you get a funding contribution from the government to purchase your goods and services, just like individualised funding, but it is a more flexible arrangement. So at the moment in New Zealand, we've got Christchurch, Waikato and the Mana Whaikaha system running, and those three areas all have slightly different systems. So to explain those systems, there would be three different things. So it's a little bit unfortunate that they've all got slightly different things, but in general, when we're talking about personalised budget, we're meaning that the budget is hosted really almost by the person, as opposed to what we've got. We would refer to it as direct funding. Okay, a personal budget is when you, so which is used in these areas, Christchurch, Waikato and the Mana Whaikaha, is able to be used for your agreed supports that you have come up with in your Enabling Good Life proposal and funding agreement. It should be focused on your goals and aspirations, so that you're not experiencing disability from society. You work out your goals and aspirations with the Kai Tohono, the Connector, from an Enabling Good Lives team. And next one, Lisa. So personalised budgets and Enabling Good Lives, the same thing. So at the beginning, someone said, what is EGL or Enabling Good Lives? And thank you, I think it was Shane who shared a link to the Enabling Good Lives page, and there's also more information at the end of this. So Enabling Good Lives is an approach to disability system transformation. But often we kind of confuse talking about EGL and talking about personalised budgets. Basically, people that are living in an EGL area have access to personalised, or sometimes called flexible budgets. So the EGL approach, which started, I think, what did I say, 2011, 2012, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, came up with the Enabling Good Lives principles, and anybody using individualised funding can relate to the Enabling Good Lives principles to ask for something. Claire just popped up there that in Christchurch, EGL is only available to school leavers. And yes, that's true. So when it was introduced, it was for anyone that was transitioning out of school. So that's how they kept the group, I guess, a bit smaller to start with. But anybody in the disabled community can use the Enabling Good Lives principles, but not everybody has access to personalised budgets. If we can turn the page. So an advantage of having a personalised budget is that you're basically getting the budget, you're able to spend the budget, and then you're reporting on it, as opposed to getting a budget, sending in timesheets or sending in requests to a host to have them pay them. So it's a subtle difference, and also a difference that maybe it's wider support. So there might be some MSD funding that's also in a personalised budget. So at the moment, you must live in one of the 3 designated areas to get a personalised budget. And I think Claire, just as you said, even within those areas, not all people with disability supports can use the system. For example, Christchurch, it only had people in transition from school to community. And at the moment in the Waikato, there's a waiting list. So even if you wanted to, you couldn't use a personalised budget. Hopefully, we're going to start seeing EGL rolled out with personalised budgets soon. And we'll turn the page. So with the personalised budget, there is only one budget, as opposed to IF, which has your personal cares, your household management and respite. The budget may also include some funds from other government agencies. I've used their MSD or Ministry of Education, but again, these things are subject to what life stage. So it might be that where MSD handled funds for vocational day services after school, that could be transferred into a personal budget. But the Ministry of Education or system, that's not in a personal budget. They're still holding that money. So there is hope that our funding streams will be more combined into one primary budget. And there is some movement in that, but at the moment it's only in some areas. The fund holder, who is the disabled person or the disabled person's agent, would normally have a separate bank account. In some areas, the money actually goes directly into that person's bank account, or in other areas, the funds can be allocated by a host or managed by a flexible disability support provider, which is in the case of Christchurch, where it might be that a person can put different pots of money into different disability support providers, or a combination. And we'll turn the page. What is the future of enabling good lives and personalised budgets? Well, as I've just mentioned, the 3 areas or 3 regions using it at the moment don't have the same processes for the administration of their budget. So it's about other areas deciding what's going to work best from those 3 prototypes. In areas where personal budgets are held by the disabled person and the payments made out of that account, they would normally do a monthly return then that goes off to show what their purchases are. But in recent times, that's shifted to using Xero software so that the information is collected from the bank feed directly in the account, which actually reduces the reporting administration for the fund holder. And Christchurch has also moved to a system of having disability support providers under the personal budgets. And next one. And we're just about there. I mentioned these at the beginning. No funding stream allows these. So illegal activities, gambling, alcohol, tobacco, supplementing your household income, or paying for things that another government agency funds. So both IF and personal budgets won't normally pay for something that the Ministry of Health might pay for, or in the case of, at the moment, disability allowances or something that are under MSD, or something that might come through from WINS is probably a better example, where if you maybe needed assistance with extra power payment or something like that, would normally come under MSD. Personal budgets, maybe one day we'll be combining everything. And next page. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all these. I think it's time for questions. But when we share this, there is a description here of what the NASCs are. If you flick on again, Lisa. And another one. Just at the end of this presentation, I've just put what a guide to what the NASCs are, what the hosts are, which you guys can have a look at in your own time, and turn another one. Many of you, if you're already using individualised funding, may find this particular one interesting. It is the service specifications for a host when they're supposed to turn things around for you. Because, you know, like sometimes you're like waiting for your allocation to be put into the host. So there's some guidelines of how long that should take and when you should challenge it. And then the next page is the Enabling Good Lives. After that one. So if you're not already familiar with Enabling Good Lives, I'd encourage you to have a look at just even this brief part. If you don't, I would also encourage you to go and have a look at the full website, enablinggoodlives.co.nz, and have a read through what that means. And now I think we're going to turn, that is the Enabling Good Lives principles. So how we can use those to help with our disability supports. And next page, time for Q&A.